So I left off talking about how we're talking about some parts of the Old Testament. I want to say too that remember Moses when he was chosen by God at the burning bush. Moses was like, I don't even want to do this. He wasn't saying, oh yes God, I'll do exactly what you say. I have so much faith and I'll behave exactly like you want. Moses was saying, he was questioning. He was saying, I don't really want to do this. Why are you making me do this? And Moses was like that throughout his whole life. He would be questioning God and he argued with God, and this is just the way he was. He wasn't second quadrant oriented. Yes, yes sir, yes sir, yes sir. He was always questioning, debating. So here's another example about. I just want to talk about two. So the first king of the Israelites was King Saul. King Saul was trying to find I think it was his dad's donkeys. His donkeys were lost. And his dad was like, hey Saul, go out and look for my donkeys. So, this doesn't seem like a guy who's going to be the king. Some guy just wandering around looking for donkeys. Seems like an unlikely place to find a king. So Saul's walking around. He's looking for the donkeys. Then Nathan, I think the prophet's name is Nathan. I forget who he was exactly, but I think it was Nathan. Nathan sees Saul. They're trying to find the next king, and then they end up picking out from this. I forget what the method is, but some sort of method they use to pick the king. And Saul was the name that they picked, and Saul was picked to be king. And Nathan says, "Yes, this guy is the king." And then Saul hides. He doesn't want to be king. So once again, an unlikely candidate. And then Nathan's like, yep, this is the king, all right. And then the people look at Saul, and he's a handsome guy, he's a tall, handsome guy, but then the people are looking at him and they're like, this guy, our king, this guy isn't that great. Why would we have him be our king? So once again, Saul didn't belong. And Saul ends up having a vision, and the vision has 4 parts, or he has some sort of prophecy, has 4 parts to it. And then right after that, they said, ever since then, people knew that Saul was a prophet of God. But once again, his prophecy had 4 parts. It was based on the quadrant. I'm not going to get into it too much. But if you want to check out this Saul, after when they said, oh, then they knew that Saul was a prophet of God. Once again, knowing after the quadrant. So another example, I said King David. King David, they wondered, his dad, he was the youngest son. The youngest isn't supposed to get any inheritance. The oldest is. But you see throughout the Bible, things are always inverted. And David's dad didn't even want to show Nathan. I think it was Nathan who was supposed to decide who would be the king. He didn't even want to show Nathan David, because it was thought that perhaps David was an illegitimate son. He had red hair. Perhaps he was related. Well, he had a Gentile origin too. He was one of his ancestors was Ruth, who was a Gentile. But he ends up picking King David, an unlikely candidate. And then David ends up, then he fights against Goliath. He throws a rock at Goliath. An interesting thing about that story is he refuses to wear the body armor, so he refuses to belong. He's not trying to fit in. He wants to be free of belongings, right? The second quadrant. He doesn't want to wear any armor. He wants to be loose so he can float. And then he throws a rock. It hits Goliath right in the head because he's flowing. He's in the zone. He's not wearing any clothes. Nothing's holding him down. Throws a rock. Saves the Israelite people from these Philistines. All right. But there's more and more. But now let me get back to the New Testament. I forgot to mention that the New Testament is divided into 4 parts. The first part is the Gospels. I forget what the second and third part are called, but there's a second and third part. And then the fourth part is Revelations. Once again, Revelations is the part that doesn't seem to fit in with the rest of them. It's an apocalyptic literature. And originally the church fathers thought that the Revelation should not be put in with them. So once again, the fourth doesn't seem to belong. It's different from the rest. So we have the quadrant even in the New Testament itself. Also, I want to say that the Gospels attributed to Paul, historians don't think all of them actually were written by Paul. They only think that 4 were written by Paul. Once again, we have the quadrant. All right. Oh, that's another example. I'll get to that more later, but okay. So, this is what I want to talk about now. This is what historians think. Historians study the Gospels and they think, like I said, that Jesus wasn't a Jewish, apocalyptic prophet, quote unquote, because they thought that Jewish was talking about the coming of the kingdom of heaven on earth, and the way that they saw that, and the way that literature, everybody, all the Jewish prophets before saw that, was that there would be a time when the Jews were glorified and the kingdom of earth, or the kingdom of heaven, would be put on earth. You look at one of the prayers that Jesus says for the people to say. He says, "Don't babble on like the pagans." So when he's talking about the pagans, he's talking about the Gentiles. He says, "Don't babble on like the pagans when you pray," because what the pagans did is they would pray and they would say, "God, give us this, and please give us this, and if we do this, and we will obey you, and we will do this, and we will give you these sacrifices, and if you give us this," and they would continue on and on and on, and "Please help my daughter with this, and please help me with this." And Jesus says, don't babble on when you pray like the pagans. It's selfish. That was my input. It's selfish, but that's what he says. Don't babble on like the pagans. And he says, instead, when you pray, say this. And he said, I forget exactly what he said, but it's something like, "Dear Father who art in heaven, thy will be done, thy kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven." So what the historians say is that Jesus was awaiting this apocalypse, this time when the kingdom of heaven would be established on earth. What I mean by apocalypse too, apocalyptic prophet, is I want to say that apocalypse just means revealing of the secret. That's all apocalypse means. But the apocalyptic prophets, they were anticipating a time when where the truth would come to earth and the kingdom of heaven would be established on earth. Now, historians look at the Gospels and they say that it's kind of clear. This is what they think, is what historical analysis says, that Jesus was not much of a fan of the Gentiles. That Jesus didn't like the Gentiles too much, and he liked the Jews the best. Now, this offends a lot of people, but this is what the historians say. So they point out this one passage where, there's a lot of them, but one passage is where a Gentile goes up to Jesus and she says, "Jesus, will you heal my daughter?" And she's begging Jesus to heal his daughter. And then Jesus says, he calls her a dog. I forget exactly how he says it, but he calls her a dog, and he says that he did not come for the Gentiles. He says that he came for the lost sheep of Israel. And he calls her a dog. And then she says, "Well, even a dog will accept the scraps." Well, Jesus says something like, why would I give the breads to a dog when I came for the lost sheep of Israel? She says, "Even a dog will accept the scraps." So Jesus says, "Wow, your faith has healed you." And then, according to the story, her daughter is healed. A way to look at that metaphysically is she stopped becoming so demanding and pushy, and she would stop trying to beg Jesus, and then she kind of became humble, and she accepted, what Jesus said. She became humble, and then this healed her daughter because she probably stopped being so pushy with her daughter. Remember, I said that a lot of problems that people have are based on psychology, and if the daughter is being pushed too much by her mother, then she might, have problems. But if the mother stops pushing the daughter around, then things might be a little easier and the daughter might be cured. So, but anyways, the historians look at this and they say, yeah, this kind of is evidence that Jesus, as a Jew, as a Jewish rabbi, was anti-Gentile. Now, there's other examples. So, yeah, like I said, Jesus said that when he was telling his apostles to go preach the word, he told them, do not go to Gentile communities. He said that he did not come to preach to the Gentiles, but he said he came to preach to Israel. So once again, we have the historians look at this and they say, wow, this is clear evidence that Jesus was kind of, I'm going to just say the word racist, even though that's not the right word, but he did not like Gentiles. So this is interesting. This is the way the historians read it. And like I said, in Luke and John, there's some things that they interpret as being anti-Jewish, but historians say that it's clear, they think, that these things were added on by Christians later to make it seem like Jesus was against the Jews and was for the Gentiles. This is what historians think. I'm not saying either way. I have a different theory, and hopefully soon I'm going to tell you what I think about it. Another thing the historians say is, they say that, like I said, Jesus said, do not preach to the Gentiles. Do not teach the Gentiles. I came for Israel. Well, at the very end of, I forget what book it was probably John. It says, it's tacked on to the very end, and this is why historians say this was probably added on, and it wasn't originally there. But it's tacked on at the very end. It says after Jesus was crucified and after he died, and then there's a lot of stuff tacked on where they say like, oh, and the Jewish priests said that his death was fake. Well, once again, the historians actually think that that his resurrection was fake. Historians believe that the resurrection was faked, and they say in ways, not all of them do, but some do, and they think that one example of this is the fact that that people, that Jesus was only on the cross for a few hours. They give different ideas about this. I'm not going to get into it too much, but like I said, I have this is I'm giving a historical analysis. I do not. I have a different theory than historians have. So, what I want to say is that at the very end, it's tacked on. It says, "And Jesus told them to make disciples of all nations." And historians say that this was probably just tacked on at the end by Christians to make it seem like Jesus was not against the Gentiles. This is interesting theories, but I do not agree with it. So I'm going to hopefully in a minute explain the way that I see it. All right.